Yeah, I felt like he's done a good job with that. He's done a good job. Hello, everyone. Hi, Dave. As usual, we're going to
go to the telephones.
Going to check if we're live. I think I'll never change from this way of doing it. Although I know as soon as comments come in, it's fine.
Yeah, but once or twice we've carried on checking way after the point when comments have actually come in. Who's going to be first now, though, do you reckon?
Anthony Christian. Wow, mate, he's always doing so well. There we go. We're live.
He's usually in the top 5, isn't he? If not first, he's top 5.
He is. He's normally there. Hey, Anthony. I hope all is well in your world. Be good to see who else is on as people join the live.
It's just Anthony. It's just this is just a conversation between friends. Oh, Matt Oliver. Hola.
Hey, Matt, how's it going, mate? Yeah, as always, thumbs up, thumbs down. Hopefully not too much down. I know it's been a busy bank holiday. Hope you all had an epic bank holiday. We got Lee, we got Angus, we got Rich.
Hey,
how you doing, Rich?
Richie J.
Who else we got? We got Dan.
Dan the man.
Dan the man. How you doing, guys? Yeah, hope you all had a wonderful bank holiday. It's flown by, isn't it? It's kind of crazy day. What did you get up to? Anything fun?
So I've just realised John's here. And
hey, John.
I did say that if he won on this one, I wasn't going to bother anymore. So you know
I remember that.
He's the man. He's the man.
Is that
what did I get up for this weekend? Nothing really, to be honest. I've been gymming it, doing a bit of a gym
well
workout.
in the gym, aren't you? Smashing it.
We've got some big hills to go up soon.
We have.
So yeah, smashing it in the gym. Didn't go out on the hills this weekend, but we're going to rectify that this week, I think. We're going to get a few in there.
Sounds good. Sounds like a plan.
Not much, mate. It's just one of those bitty weekends, where I just kept myself busy, kept myself out of trouble.
But isn't it, you got a new, hopefully, relatively new studio for the missus coming soon?
Yeah.
In, what, a month?
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah.
Awesome. But yeah, I hope you all had a good time anyway. It was a nice, relatively chilled one for us. We've had a lot of weekends in the mountains lately, so it was nice. Did some local walks, nothing too mad. Yeah, what have you been up to? It'd be great to see, what I know Rich has recently come back from Tanzania. Rich, great to see you back and well. Yeah. I hope all is well, buddy. Yeah, it'd be good to see what you've all been up to. We've had customers in Tubcal. We had some summits on Sunday morning, which was fantastic.
Yeah, amazing.
We knew there was a lot of, just obviously in the group and seeing people posting, there was a lot of flight cancellations over the last week. So some people have had trouble getting to, obviously, to certain areas. Which is challenging.
That was a funny one, whether they initially they said it was like weather, but now they're saying like air traffic control problems and stuff like that. So apologies to anyone who's been caught up in that. Sounds like an absolute nightmare. Stuart Taylor, Jambo.
Hey Stuart, how are you?
Summited, awesome, mate. Well done.
Of course you did. Well done, Stuart, mate. It's nice to hear that the journey has been a positive one, and I know it's anytime you go on these trips is fantastic, isn't it? And great to see you back down safe as well, which is number one. And it's great also to hear about these journeys. I know people have been posting in the group. Some people have been posting as well, kind of intermittently in the summit zone. It's always great to see where everyone is at, because our job and our kind of role really is to try and help everyone get to these places. So it's nice to see you all back safely. And that kind of leads us on really. Today we wanted to kind of take on something we haven't talked about for a while. I know we have done in the past. Obviously, 90-95% of our trips are a high altitude. Some of them are at low altitudes these days, still in the mountains. There's some awesome treks around the world, but we wanted to kind of focus on some of the kind of dangers that can be at altitude and on trips. You go into these places, there are, less oxygen, and also in the mountains, and there's going to be some kind of dangers that do occur. And we thought, well, let's talk about that. It's a great subject to talk about. And it always brings up some kind of good questions as well around those dangers and how we can mitigate them, and also how to mentally approach them. Because that can happen anywhere. Not just on our trips, but if you're doing your training hikes in the UK. Some bits around that, or wherever you're watching this now, if you're in the US, if you're in Europe, whatever you're doing any of your training, it's important to kind of focus on some of the not just focus, but be aware of those dangers and how you can minimize them.
Exactly. We don't like to go. I mean, one phrase that we don't use is sort of ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
I say it quite a lot that, you know, knowledge dispels fear. So one of the things we want to know is, you know, what's different from adventure travel to sort of regular travel? Well,
yeah,
the adventure side of it, you know, comes with a little bit of uncertainty, a little bit of danger, a little bit of risk. And it's about understanding what those are in your chosen adventure. So if you're going to Everest Base Camp, well, what are the risks there? You know, what potential dangers am I going to be confronted with, and what am I going to be overcoming, and what makes it the challenge?
Yeah.
And it's good to know about those things. You know, I mean, altitude obviously is probably the biggest one. Everyone always says that's always a risk, but not even altitude. You know, it could be things like the terrain can change. You know, if you go into sort of the high places of the world where it's glaciated, where there's bad weather, there's wind, there's snowstorms, there's whiteouts. And that just sounds fun. That's just on day one.
Day one. Brilliant. That sounds like a great first day.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it is. Anytime you're in these places and you're experiencing those things, you know, it can be quite scary at times. And, you know, I know a lot of you have been on trips with us already. Hey, Marky V, I hope all is well. Kate, great to see you joining us. Charlotte as well, just tuned in. These things enter your brain, don't they? Whether you've got that kind of positivity force field up or not, things creep in, and sometimes they can play on your mind. And I think sometimes it's good to talk about these things and especially get real with them, because there's a really interesting guy actually called Alan Arnett. There's a really interesting blog. Always coverist. He always covers kind of the big expedition seasons in the spring. Yeah. Always follow him around the Everest stuff. Now it's the K2 stuff as well. He's always kind of in the know, and he's in touch with a lot of the expedition teams. And something that he always kind of talks about is, you know, because he's climbed Everest, he's climbed K2, he's climbed a lot of other mountains around the world, is kind of being open and honest about what you're going into. Like he always talks about getting the family kind of involved. Yeah. And it's not necessarily involved in terms of expedition, but getting them on side, which can be a challenge in itself, because, you know, a lot of people who've got husband, wives, partners, you know, younger children, people that worry or concerned friends, that you're going into these kind of environments that some people label as dangerous. And sometimes, you know, you always talk about knowledge dispels fear, but some people don't have that knowledge to make an agreement on whether it's dangerous or not. Yeah. So one thing that Alan does is, you know, he sits down with his family, you know, is open and honest with them, but talks about the managed and unmanaged dangers that can happen anytime in life. You know, you can walk onto a road, and unfortunately, you know, things can happen there, you know, and that's a step out your front door. You know, not to go down the negative route here, but when we go to the mountains, then it's the same. You know, things can happen anywhere in the world. Yeah. But we do like to bring into that level of control. And I think, you know, there's always going to be things that you can't control. You know, that in the world, there's the volcanoes, there's natural things that occur. You're never going to be able to control them. And we want to control the controllables. We want to focus on what we can control, which is ourselves. And also as well, you know, looking at, you know, from a company, adventure travel company, we like to have certain level of impact on the trips that we run. That could be the itineraries that we run, the type of guides that we use. Also as well, how we, you know, we're trying to give knowledge to you guys to dispel those fears that will inherently make it just a little bit safer for you. Yeah. You know what I mean? No, I know there's a lot that I've talked about there.
No, exactly. And one of the things I think is important to understand as well, when you're talking about, you know, introducing these trips to your family and your friends and things like that, is you have to go a little bit of, once you've educated yourself, there is a lot to go towards educating them as well. Because one of the big things is, if you tell people that you go into Everest Base Camp, for instance, what they'll hear is, I'm going to Everest. You know, and you get a lot of people that are concerned, like, oh my God, you're going to be walking past dead bodies, and you know, what if they can't get you down? I hear that sort of stuff. Yeah, so from the very basic level, it's about sort of understanding, you know, what is the inherent sort of dangers and risks associated with exactly what you're doing, and understanding the difference between sort of Everest Base Camp and climbing Everest, because it is apples and oranges. Yeah, you know.
And that's on a lot of different trips, you know, with regards to, like, you know, whether you're on Kili, whether you're on Machu Picchu, wherever you're going to go to, there are always, you know, there are always going to be dangers in these areas, and sometimes they can be blown out of proportion. And again, just because of the certain trigger words that can suddenly think, oh my God, epic, you know, if anyone says Everest, people naturally do think about the summit.
Yeah.
And rightly so. You know, it's in the news a lot. You know, the queues, you know, on K2. I know we're moving mountains now, but you know, around, unfortunately, things that go bad in the mountains.
Yeah.
They're always the first thing you hear on the news, right? And you rarely hear about the good stuff, which I know is news, and I know it is what it is, but it's almost important as well to kind of take a step back and just be conscious of that. So you can make those decisions on whether it's the right place for you to go or not.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, the one of the things that's funny with that K2 thing, there was something big in the news, and the newspapers and the websites have realized now that if you say something like, really prominent person walks past dying Sherpa on their way to the summit, immediately that person is going to be a target, you know, and is going to be the subject of a lot of online abuse and criticism, when in actual fact, those people that understand the mountains understand that if someone does collapse above 8,000 meters, you're not helping them by stopping and helping them if you're not equipped to be able to do that, you know.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it?
And
it'd be a tough
you know,
situation.
There's very little you can do if someone's not, you know, ambulatory to get them down from that height, and it's almost impossible, especially at the bottleneck on K2, which is where that happened.
Yeah, it was quite a lot in the news, wasn't it? Especially around Christine Harilla, who summited all the 14,000ers.
I mean,
8,000ers.
It's just amazing that what happened was they caught that bit on camera. You know, someone took a photograph. Yeah. But you're walking past people all the time that are either sick or unwell.
Yeah.
So those 8,000 meter peaks is a different ballgame, and people need to understand that. Unfortunately, it's a little bit like kind of. I watched a recent documentary on Netflix, Deepest Breath, maybe. You know.
Yeah, I haven't seen that yet. Yeah,
but you would love it. I don't. But
I know. I should watch
climbing a mountain, like anything once you get above sort of 6,000 meters is an extreme sport.
Yeah.
And it's as dangerous as that sort of deep sea free diving, you know, where they go down to like, I don't know, 60 meters or something like that, or further. I'm not sure. Maybe 104 was like a world record.
It's 150 something meters, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's deep.
I mean, going down there without oxygen and then coming back, you know, it's one of those types of things. But where we're talking about is majority is like base camp, Kilimanjaro, Machu Picchu,
the trekking side of things.
Yeah. So then
obviously we got peaks and stuff.
Yeah. But most of the stuff that you will encounter, the dangers are a little closer to home. You know, like,
that's true. That's true.
You know, you're not going to be walking past anyone that's dying and not be able to help them. But at the same time, you know, we'll kick it off with altitude sickness, I guess, which is
and you will see it and you will experience it. You know, I know a lot of you, you know, have been at altitude before. Just looking at the names. Hey, Bri, I hope all is well. Good afternoon, mate. And hey, Andrew, thanks for joining us. And Daz as well. And Sophie. Sorry, I always say as well. It's like I'm calling out everyone's name. Just don't want people to feel left out. But no, great to see you all here. And you know, any time that you go into these places, it's going to be, and that's altitude. It's going to be hard because you know that by being at altitude, you can, you know, your body's under stress. So, you know, it might kind of show things that normally aren't there. And Daz, thanks for sharing that as well, mate. Well, I'll come on to your question about the your diaphragm, because really interesting question actually around that. I see we've one of our Yetis has written all these questions down. We'll be coming onto that. But anytime you're altitude will bring up certain things. You know, you're gonna experience some form of headache. You're gonna experience some form of maybe losing your appetite. You know, you might not feel great. You might not feel like uber positive at that moment in time. I think a lot of people have those similar things.
Yeah.
You hopefully by just talking about this kind of thing, you can kind of gauge and get comfortable with that, knowing that that's just part of acclimatizing. Obviously, there's these severe parts to altitude where you've got, you know, HACE and HAPE, you know, high altitude pulmonary edema and high altitude cerebral edema, which are the two serious ones. And really, they are more for the climbers, but it can happen anytime you're at altitude if you're not acclimatizing well. And we've had Evertrekkers who've had those symptoms, and we've had to get them down. So yeah, it's interesting to be aware of all these factors, especially of altitude, because you're aware of going into it that it can be dangerous.
Yeah.
But that's also part of the magic, is that if this was 100% safe, it wouldn't have that word adventure travel next to it, would it?
Well, no, exactly.
You know, it'd be it'd be a different type of journey that we'd be talking about.
Exactly. And that's part of the challenge. That's the reason why we set ourselves these things,
Yeah.
you know, because I've pondered it quite a lot. Like, why go to base camp? Why go to Kilimanjaro? Why climb Mera or anything like that?
Yeah.
If, like, the reason is because there's a chance you might not make the trip. You know, you'll always make it back. 100% of our customers have always made it back. But the summit is not guaranteed. That's what's adventurous about it.
Yeah.
The fact that you're sort of almost like, you know, you're pitching yourself against the elements and against the altitude, and you're using the tools at your disposal to kind of overcome that challenge and win. But it's not a guarantee. And that's one of the things here. I just noticed Andrew Green said had AMS himself on Mera.
Oh, really?
Peaks, hey, Andrew. The peaks are where it's more likely to happen, because when we actually are trekking, we're gaining our altitude quite gradually over a longer period of time. When you're climbing a mountain, unfortunately, there's no way to avoid going up like 1,000 meters at a time because it's a mountain. You know, it's not like a long 10-mile long stretch of land that you can kind of go up and down.
Yeah.
You know, you have to gain altitude quite quickly. And sadly, you know, one of those things is that you can get quite ill. Often it doesn't happen overnight, though. There are symptoms that have started to arise earlier on that set the tone for that trip. And then really I mean, it's kind of down to luck in a way, whether you can do the things you need to do to recover and bounce back with enough energy to kind of make the summit. But everyone's physiology is different as well, right? Yeah,
exactly. And every time you go to altitudes the first time, essentially, you know, we've talked about this before, you know, and sometimes your body could be in it's kind of 100% state.
Yeah.
You know, as much as your Garmin will tell you, or whatever you're using, that your body battery is 100, or whatever it is. Mine's saying, 100 today. It's pretty good. Well rested.
Body battery. I don't think mine tells me what my body battery is.
But sometimes, and you know, it can lead you to think, okay, I'm fine. Whereas actually, if there could be something going on in your body that could impact how you feel at altitude. So just because I mean, there's lots of different ways around this, but just because you've had AMS before doesn't necessarily mean you'll have it again. You know, your body could have been less hydrated. There could have been something going on. You might have just been unlucky. It can happen.
Yeah.
Sometimes your body won't acclimatize. I mean, touch wood, I've always been pretty okay. I haven't spent a lot of time at altitude. But sometimes, you know, you go into these altitudes, even our guides get sick.
Yeah.
You know, and obviously majority of the time they're fine, right? You know, they're leading groups, they're fine. But then other times they maybe got an underlying chest issue going on. They might have maybe they've, you know, especially over the last few years, you know, with COVID, there's a lot about that we still don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, some people's you know, cardiovascular kind of, you know, what's happening there, it is different now after having COVID. So, you know, it's just things that kind of get added into the mix, and, you know, it can make it a little bit more challenging. But yeah, Andrew, it's a really good, you know, like bringing that, and, you know, going on Mera. Anytime you go to altitude is going to be hard. Mera, which is the highest trekking peak in Nepal, you know, that's a challenge, mate. That's one heck of a challenge. But I would say that, you know, I know it must feel quite emotional about it. You know, I know if you went to Mera, and if it was me and I had AMS and I came down, emotionally I'd be, you know, not in a great place. But, you know, if you can think of, right, that it's not going anywhere, what can I do next time that could potentially help me?
Yeah.
And part of that could be, you know, maybe the type of training that you're doing. You know, it could be about how you are hydrated. It could be that, you know, let's look at your experience. Have you been to high altitude before? What was your experience on them? How did you fare? Because then we can kind of build up a pattern and build up a kind of, you know, how your body is reacting to altitude, and how we can then go about solving that problem.
And sometimes as well, you know, there like you said, there are little factors that sometimes can play a big part.
Yeah.
You know, you might have caught like some form of like bug, or been fighting off something that you weren't even necessarily feeling.
Yeah.
I turned back on Tupkal, which is, you know, quite a way, you know, not anywhere near as high as Mera. So technically, you know, I was in a place where I felt like I should have been able to reach the summit, all things being well, and we had good weather, you know, it was all going well. But back home, I caught a bit of a sinus infection.
Yeah.
And I actually don't think it was the sinus infection that stopped me. I was the antibiotics that I took. I picked them up, if you remember, on the way to the airport.
Yeah,
so I started taking them like that close to the trip. 2 days later, I was trekking in the Atlas Mountains, and I could not deploy energy whatsoever.
Yeah.
Every step felt like I was exhausting myself.
Yeah.
But I had no choice but to push on. So I did push through it, and I ended up getting heat exhaustion, and it was all sorts of problems. And
it was tough.
And the summit was, at that time, it was out of bounds. So I know what it's like to feel like I have to turn down as well. Richie J recently had to turn back, come in from Killy. Again, a bug, and then was hit with some altitude
Hey, Rich,
sickness.
how you doing?
Rich, man, hope you're doing well.
Yeah.
Honestly, like it's something that if you're going to dedicate yourself to an adventurous lifestyle and you're going to climb mountains for fun, that eventually it is almost guaranteed there'll be one that you have to turn back on. I've turned back on Penavan.
Yeah, well,
you know, like
it can happen anywhere.
I got halfway at Penavan, I just didn't feel that well.
Yeah,
and I was like, you know what? Not today. I'm going back down. I never really feel like the urge to push myself beyond what I feel is safe.
And Rich, you know, sending positive vibes, mate. I know it's you're never fun when these things happen, but like you said, if you've got something that's going on in your body and then you're trying to fight that at altitude, it can be hard. But I think, you know, have a little bit of confidence in what you've already achieved, knowing that you've done EBC. You know, so you know it's not the altitude essentially. Use that as kind of fuel for your future endeavors, mate. And I know, you know, thanks for you know, keep us abreast of your plans, and mate, anytime, you know, drop us a message. Always keen to kind of talk about the future journey. But yeah, mate, just keep going. You know, I know you've got these kind of things, you know, in your mind, and I know you're a determined man, but you can do it. And I know it hasn't worked out this time, but it doesn't mean it wouldn't work out again in the future.
Yeah.
You know, but also great to see that you got to see a bit of Tanzania that maybe you wouldn't have. I got to see some of your pictures and your videos. Mate, it looked fantastic where you went, and great to see the guys on the ground were looking after you.
But mate, it happens. It really does. I remember the first time we went to Tanzania, we didn't go to climb, but we were hanging around, and I met this guy, and he had to come. He didn't reach the summit. He come back down.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, unfortunately, it's one of those things that if you're climbing high, you know, it's a game of margins, really. And yeah, but you did incredibly well to do that. Amanda as well here saying that when she did Gokyo, she got a bug and didn't feel well. I know that feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I've done a lot of trips where I haven't felt very well, but I think that's because I've done a lot of trips.
Victor, we know Victor very well. He's a great guy, big character.
Victor,
great to see you had Victor. He's a really top bloke. We met him probably about 4 years ago, maybe, Victor. And when we were kind of, you know, obviously recruiting in Tanzania, yeah, fantastic guide. Definitely around. He knows that area of Moshi really well, especially kind of some of the schools and stuff. But yeah, great to hear you had Victor. And yeah, it's and listening, it's great. And thanks so much as well for sharing these kind of experiences. You know, and we were kind of wondering where this was going to go today. And I know we talked about altitude, and, you know, especially when things don't go to plan, it's hard to talk about these things, isn't it? I mean, you know, yourself, Dave, after Tubcal, it's hard to talk about it because you've got that emotion attached.
Yeah, no, it sucked.
Yeah.
You know, but there was, it was hard to process initially. I mean, it was weird for me because at the time when I actually turned back, I was gutted to be turning around like in the moment, but only for about 10 minutes. I knew as soon as I started going down, like the load was coming off my body. Like walking uphill was so hard that as soon as I turned around, I started to feel like it was almost like my body telling me, right, that's it. You've made the right call. Just get down.
And you did.
And so I did. And I was, but it was more like afterwards, in the days afterwards, when I had time to kind of think about it, that I start wondering, like, oh, could I have pushed on? You know, could I have pressed on and just made the summit? Like,
you could have, but it would have got you into an element. You know, we talk about danger and unmanaged and managed. You managed that danger by making that decision.
It would have been,
it would have been into unmanaged danger.
It would have been unmanaged danger.
You know
I would have been rolling the dice, basically.
Exactly.
Which is dangerous. I didn't want to get myself into a situation where I had to be taken down some difficult terrain, putting other people at risk. And talking about terrain as well, that's another thing that, you know.
I know we focused on altitude, but terrain.
Terrain is tricky. So when you go to, you know, the high places of the world, generally they're quite remote. The roads aren't paved, sadly. You know, so as you're sort of making your way from A to B, the landscape can change. It can be different on your way up as it was, you know, the last time. It can be different on your way down than it was when you went up.
I think you've hit on a good point there as well, because you know, we had some our first two K2 base camp trips. The one is still running, but the one our first trip to K2 base camp, and actually a lot of that there were parts of that because there'd been some sort of landslips. There'd been certainly because you're traveling along a glaciated area. Obviously glaciers move and the land can change. So the actual itinerary was adjusted with that, and I think sometimes we forget this. We obviously build the itinerary in terms of days, but because the terrain can be challenging, and we're trying to make it as trying to manage that danger as best we can. Sometimes we do have to change the itinerary.
Yeah, no, I think
for that particular reason.
I think there was flooding.
There was
the roads were flooded
in Pakistan. Yeah.
So we had to kind of do some make some amends. And like every time I've gone to Everest Base Camp, Everest Base Camp has looked visibly different from one time to the next. And one time there was when we did it, and it was really wet.
Yeah.
There was a lot of melting of the glacier and stuff like that, and we were kind of scrambling.
Yeah.
We were like, the glacier had been so melted that we had to kind of scramble down and scramble back up, when normally it's just a trek on relatively flat terrain.
It can change so much, can't it?
Yeah, and at that point, then you have to kind of. It is about assessing it. You don't carry on regardless, but you do take the time to kind of assess the situation, have a look at it, and the onus is on. Yeah. Well, the guide is ultimately responsible, but everyone, all of us as individuals, have to make our own decision about what we're willing to kind of put ourselves through, and what level of danger feels acceptable to us.
Yeah, and it's some really good comments coming in as well. Alison, good question about Lukla. We will come on to the questions. Thanks for any other questions as well. Do drop them in. They could be about dangers. They could be about Maidal Bhutans. They can be about anything you want to chat about. They can be on anchor power banks, whatever you want to talk about. But yeah, you're right. There's some good, what John hit the nail on the head there. I guess it's better to turn around and know that you can come back another time.
Yeah.
And to push on and maybe get into world of trouble and put others at risk, which I know Bri has also kind of mentioned there about putting the rest of the team in a bit of risk as well. And it's great, and thanks so much that you are thinking about other people, because it's hard, isn't it? Because a lot of us as individuals have those personal desires. Right, I'm going to summit Kili, but obviously then you realize when you're on a group trip that it's not just about you; it's about all of you. And it's great to see that the energy is like that with our Evertrackers as well, and which is awesome. We wouldn't expect anything less.
Exactly.
But no, it's hard though, isn't it? Because you got to kind of put the competitive part of you down, which we all have in us, and we all have that bit of ego or whatever that drives you to do this stuff, which is great. But you also have to think about the collective as well. And
I mean,
when it comes to dangers, that you have to think about it.
Yeah, 100%. And it's not necessarily that if you're starting to struggle, but the summit is still doable, you're going to be sent back. It's when you get to that point where you need to turn back.
Yeah.
The decision is to go back. You have to make the right call. Mm-hmm. Like we will push people to get to their goal, whether that be base camp, Kili, Machu Picchu. We'll push them right to the very edge of what's safe. And as soon as it becomes unsafe to continue, then you're putting people at risk, and things can potentially start to go wrong.
Exactly. Yeah, it's good. And it's interesting putting all these different things into the mix, because we're talking about altitude, we're talking about terrain. One of the other big ones personally as well is almost your level, your comfort zone kind of level. And I talk about that from what you're used to dealing with. I know before I talked about how everyone's like trying to escape their kind of comfort zone, and that's how you grow it. But it's more about trying to expand your comfort zone, because I was at a talk in Keswick, and I know I've mentioned this a while back now, and I did an article about it probably about 2 years ago, and it was this awesome kind of trad climber at Keswick Mountain Festival. I forgot the lady's name now, but she said some really, I thought, were quite poignant things. And it was in this tent, and I was like, this makes complete sense. Where she's talking about, imagine you're looking at, you're firing an arrow, to a target, and those targets, there's kind of 3 levels. And what she was thinking was, in the middle, say, let's call it green, because green is safe, right? Green is go, which means it's good. And that is generally your area of comfort that you don't even have to think about. There's no worries, there's no fears, and that's your comfort zone. And then you've got this area around it, which is kind of, it's pushing your limits. It's outside of that. So you're thinking about it, but there's no real danger of anything happening to you. Whereas the other zone, the third zone, is the one where you're completely out of your comfort zone. And one slip could be the end. So, if we look at the old school kind of thing, which is, okay, get out, escape your comfort zone, which, to be honest, I used to say a lot. But by escaping your comfort zone, you're putting yourself in those high risk areas. Whereas if you're expanding your knowledge and expanding your experience, that in turn increases your comfort zone, which means then it's no longer one slip and that could be it. It's more that you're thinking about things, or you're not, because your comfort zone expanding, and you're going to be able to basically take on challenges you never thought you'd be able to do.
Yeah.
And I think, talking about the trips, and I know we're going a lot into kind of mindset today around this stuff, but that controls everything, doesn't it? But if you can get your head around that and think, okay, what things can I do? What things can I study or read or watch, or go and do myself? Maybe it could be a mountain skills course, which I'll come on to in a sec. It could be a navigation course. It could be, maybe nutrition. It could be, whatever it is to expand that comfort zone of yours. That means that danger is minimized. Whilst talking about skills, there was, we do have, and I realized I was trying to segue into it. We do have a Scotland Winter Skills that we're doing. And I know we've talked about peaks, and some people have talked about Mara Peak, which this will be really useful for. And Scotland Winter Skills, we've got a date. We've got one date so far, which is next year. I will put the link in, but I wanted to show, because Dave, you know what? I've put a little video here.
He's good. I mean, this is getting too professional.
Is this going to be seamless? Well, Zach's not in today.
Yeah, he's left.
But he would be proud of us. But I'm going to show this little video. He won't be able to hear us. Watch this little video. It's about a minute long. Just some from some of our winter skills course, which I was on back in February this year, which was fantastic, up in the Cairngorms. And I think we got the link in the comments as well. Now, this is open to book onto. Enjoy. Wow, I love.
Round two. I like the bit at the end where he's digging the camera back out.
Oh yeah. Well, you gotta have a bit of fun, haven't you? And that's the winter skills weekend, and we got the link in the comments there. I can see the team have put up. Definitely be great to see you all on there. Going back to comfort zone, some of the people and the Evertrekkers who were on that weekend. Long weekend. I know that by the end of it, their comfort zone expanded. Some of the terrain was quite steep. They were used to crampon ice axe. They were used to those things. They didn't really have to think about as much. Whereas before, they would have been, oh my God, I can never go up that. It's too slippery. When now it's given them a bit of confidence. And that doesn't need to be winter skills here. We can talk about anything. Sometimes it can be, the type of boots you're wearing. Sometimes people like wearing trail shoes instead of boots. But, if you can, again, have certain boots that match the terrain, give you a bit more confidence when you go in on kind of changeable ground.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I mean, that was one of the things when we did our winter skills way back when, like to stop to think of your boots as like a mountaineering tool.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
If you get the right boots, they're a mountaineering tool as much as your axe and as much as your helmet and harness.
Yeah.
They need to be comfortable, and you need to be able to walk in them, sure, but actually you need to be able to use them as a platform to kick steps and stuff like that. So yeah, really important stuff. What are you thinking, Ed? Should we dive into some? Yeah, because there's a few cues.
There's some good questions as well. Keep them coming, guys. I know we've feel like we're talking to you a lot today in terms of like just talking about specific things, but we'll go into your questions, so keep them coming. What you got, Dave? What's the first cues?
So let's have a quick look. So Pratesh has asked,
hey, Pratesh,
how many miles do you trek a day on EBC? What time do you start the daily hike? Is there a lot of downtime? So mileage each day, to be honest, it's quite a hard one for me to remember, because I always
very different.
I always do it in terms of hours.
Yeah.
And that tends to be when you're talking about how long does it take to get from A to B. Miles is relative, right? Because you can do 5 miles a lot quicker at sea level than you can at altitude. So it's not really a good marker. What we like to use is sort of how many hours it takes for you to be able to walk from A to B, because we can all understand that how hard it is for us to walk 2 hours compared to 6 or 7 hours. So the average day on EBC will be around, the shortest day I think could be around 4.5, 5 hours, and the longest day could be like 10 hours. So that's generally it. You'll start hiking in the morning, depends on kind of the group, but generally no later than 8 o'clock. So you wake up sort of maybe 6:30, go down for breakfast, get all your water prepped, and then you'll be heading off. And you'll generally be done by sort of mid-afternoon. So, maybe like 2, 3 o'clock, something like that. By most days, you're pretty much there. Some days do take a bit longer than others, and some people take a bit longer than others. But there is plenty of downtime. So most of the time when you finish a trek, you can like get changes in casuals, go down, play cards, rehydrate, eat some loads of food. If you're in places like Namche and Dingboche, I love to go for a wander and
explore, innit?
Check out the stores and buy some snacks and things like that. Particularly on the acclimatization days, you'll have loads of downtime. So generally you're only active for maybe 3 to 4 hours on those days. The rest of the time is spent resting and acclimatizing, man. So
Everest.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Nice.
One thing you can do is, if you go onto my Strava, you'll find me, David Carpenter. I have recorded the Everest Base Camp trek on Strava, all but I think the last day. But you don't have to worry about the last 3 days, because they're the same as the first 3 days. So
as well as that as well, you'll see that there's a little, I will actually show it on the screen. There is an actual article we put on there as well about the daily distances and height gains on the Everest Base Camp trek, which you can see. I will show it there again. So Pratesh, have a look at that. It's really, really useful. As Dave mentioned, then, we always like to keep it with time rather than distance, because some people can think some distances and they'd be like, oh, it's an easy day. We could say like 4 or 5 miles and like, oh, that's not long, but it could take you 7 hours.
Exactly.
Because your altitude, it does slow everything down. So we always use time rather than distance, which is, I know, is a hard thing to gauge, because, when people are like, oh, I can walk this quite far actually at, in 7 hours. But altitude, it really slows you down.
Well, like acclimatization day at Dingboche, it's probably about 2 miles, maybe 3.
But takes you 4 hours.
But the first 3 are like that.
Exactly. So
it's
quite hard.
It's quite tough. Also, and do
you
know what I realised we haven't done?
Go on.
We haven't introduced them.
We haven't actually, has we? Yeah, that's true. I feel like they need a proper introduction. But then again, they are on the comments today.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got Dylan on the comments
today.
He
is on the comments today.
Who is Dylan, you ask? Well, Dylan and also Alethea are our 2 new Yetis. So they've joined the fold, and I'm sure should we grab them on a live soon?
Definitely. Yeah, I think so. They're looking nervously now. But no, we will intro to the community whenever we have new Yetis. No doubt you'll meet them in time. And I'm sure you're interested to hear about the Yeti names. I mean, obviously it's the most important thing.
Have they decided on their Yeti names yet? I think Alethea is Hippie Yeti.
She is, so she is Hippie Yeti.
I mean, if she's not, she is now.
That's what everyone's going to refer to. Although Dylan said he wants to be Sporty Yeti.
Sporty Yeti.
Which I think is more Sporty Spice. So call him Sporty Spice. I'm sure you'll love it.
You have just chucked him under the bus now. But yeah. So we've got Hippie Yeti and Sporty Spice.
Sporty Spice.
Brilliant.
But no, they're two wonderful people. They're going to be great parts of the team. I'm sure you'll either be speaking to them or emailing them or seeing them around the community over the coming months and hopefully years. So yeah, it's always great when we were able to bring in some new Yetis to look after our customers.
Is there someone called Alison Morgan watching this live? Because I've just gained a new follower on Strava, and I get about.
Is that what it is?
I get about 3 a year.
I don't know how you do it with that watch. It pings. I couldn't do it.
Do you know why you need it, mate?
No.
If you're in ops.
Is that what it is?
If you're in operation,
that's it. In operations.
I'm out riding my bike, and all of a sudden I'll get an email from someone. Yeah, see Alison there. Thank you, Alison. I got a new follower. I knew it would happen. I get so rarely get new followers that
here he is.
Has to be a thing.
Sporty Yeti here. He's on it.
Yeah.
Now, thanks for the welcome. Here we go. So what we get: ideas to persuade her. Need to convince Leah's Everest to bin off her year 10 GCSE revision. Get out and climb Killy in the summer holidays. Ideas to persuade her.
What has he done to bring her up?
I know, she's amazing. She's like 16.
Almost 16. When the dad is like, I need to stop my child revising. The roles have reversed here. Yeah, I mean, I know Dave. He may be old in terms of years, but
but no, great stuff. Well, if she needs any inspiration, just point her our way, Dave. We can have a chat and see if we can get her on the Killy trip next year, August. Great time to go. I say we got a lot of we've had over the last few weeks, a lot of summits. So yeah, let's do it. I mean, she's done Everest Base Camp. Now it's time for Killy.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe, and I know she did some kind of work for charity stuff. Is there a charity that she cares about? Maybe Killy, another biggie to kind of climb for charity. Obviously doesn't need to be for charity, but just something to kind of motivate. Nigel, do you need any vaccinations for EBC? Yes, you do. There's not any. Just trying to think now how I word it.
It's okay, and you keep pausing.
No. I should know off the top of my head, but there are a few optional ones. But the main ones that you get, your boosters, your tetanus, your typhoid, diphtheria, you make sure you have those up to date. There are some optional ones for those areas. You've got some of the hepatitis that you need. You've got the rabies jabs. Some people choose to have them. Some people don't. Obviously they are optional and they do cost rather than the ones you can get for your GP. I would check out with your GP though, Nige.
I just realised I can't put any comments in there, so I've just sent you one.
Okay.
Nomad Travel Clinic.
Ooh, we got some comments. I've just seen a notification. Let me get this up for you, Dave. Here we go.
3.
And it looks like it's. See what you did there. You had to go down that route.
I know. Sorry. Couldn't help myself.
Keep it clean.
Yeah.
And what vaccinations? There we go. It's already in there. Fantastic.
Awesome.
So yeah, Nige, definitely have a look at that article. I would say the ones on there. Obviously the additional ones, some of them you've got to have like multiple jabs, so just make sure you don't leave it to kind of like the last week to get them done. Try and get them done a few months before you're due to go, because some of them you've got to spread them out a little bit. Like rabies, I think the hepatitis as well is 2 jabs. So don't quote me on that. Have a little look on that that blog post there. It'll have links as well to places like Nomad Health Clinics, the NHS, that sort of thing.
Awesome. So I'll take this one from Alison, and then I reckon you should talk about diaphragms.
Ooh, can't wait.
So Alison, which would you recommend for a first-time high-altitude hike?
Good question.
Please say EBC is where coming next year. To be honest, I reckon Everest Base Camp, actually. And you know why, Alison? Because it was my very first time in altitude. I hadn't been higher than Snowdon. In fact, I did Snowdon afterwards. So in the UK, I think the highest I'd ever probably been before I went to high altitude was Penavan.
That's crazy.
And then
how were you at altitude?
And I was totally fine. Yeah, absolutely fine. So yeah, and then I went to Everest Base Camp and had an amazing time. And then since then, it's just been up and away. But I think I wouldn't. I mean, sometimes I would say, look, it's best to kind of build up to these things. So unless you're a particularly savage type of individual, going straight into Mera or Aconcagua might be like a a lot to kind of bite off.
Yeah.
And some people certainly bite off more than they can chew that way. And it's best to kind of build your experience levels up. There's no reason why you can't go and do a peak straight away, but you give yourself more chance of success by kind of, I think, going into these things. I think Daz has got a question for you, mate.
Yeah, I'm just, hey Daz, how are we doing? As an ex-soldier, currently have long COVID. Yeah, I know a lot of people are having these kind of issues. I know I did for a long time because I've got some issues with, well, I had some issues, it's a lot better now. With my asthma, it got to a really difficult level. I'm in the hills and gym fair bit, also have an elevated hemidiaphragm. Doesn't restrict me at sea level or, in the mountains. My only concern, how would I cope at high altitude? Anyone have similar experience? So yeah, specifically Daz, that what you've got going there, I haven't heard that that said in that way around any issues with someone's diaphragm at high altitude. The one thing I would say, I mean, always obviously chat to your GP, chat to a medical professional about these things, is that we do get people who have certain things going on with their lungs, obviously with heart issues, which are fine. I would check the obviously the severity of it. I mean, from what you've said, if you're already doing a lot of cardio work anyway, and it's not really restricting you and it doesn't harm you at sea level, I don't see any reason why it would impact you at altitude. Obviously, you're going to be in an oxygen deprived environment, but it sounds like your oxygen's getting around your body anyway. In a certain way, and I don't know, with a diaphragm, in terms of what's going on there. We get a lot of asthmatics who, in terms of that, they don't quite get full breath. They don't have as big a volume as some people, and actually asthmatics tend to do quite well at altitude, just because they're used to getting low oxygen as it is. So they kind of, with their altitude, it's kind of, well, it's the same.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because you're in some of these villages and you're seeing people kind of smoking, locals smoke, and you're thinking, wow, and 4,000 meters here, and they're running around, and you're like, okay.
The people that live at Gorakshep for the season,
yeah, I know,
they spend 3 months there, man.
That's a long time at Gorakshep, isn't it? Too long for me at Gorakshep.
24 hours is a long time at Gorakshep.
It's never comfortable at Gorakshep, that's for sure.
But I reckon I could make it comfortable if I had my own little area and my own little room and stuff. I'd be all right, and particularly my own little toilet. I'd be all right there.
Good question, though. You want to take the next one?
Yeah,
Danny,
so Danny has said,
hey,
good afternoon, gang. Hope all is well. I'm leaving to Machu Picchu on July 24th with the trek. That's slang for Evertrek.
Is that it?
Yeah,
is that slang?
Yeah, it's like, it's like the trek,
I prefer Evertrek.
Yeah, I do as well. Do we need Diamox for this trip? I used it on Kilimanjaro and it worked well for me.
Cool.
Thoughts, please. Honestly, it's a Diamox is a personal choice. We know it can be very, very useful at high altitude. Obviously, when going to Machu Picchu is not quite as extreme altitude as Kilimanjaro.
Yeah.
So there's every possibility that you'll go there and you'll be absolutely fine. The way I use it, and this isn't a recommendation, this is just how I used it when I was on Kilimanjaro, is I started without it. And if I started to feel slightly unwell or started to develop some symptoms, then I started half a pill in the morning and half a pill in the evening, and that was enough for me. That's how I take it. If you want to take it before you go, almost as like a preventative measure, then again, that's a personal choice. You've used it before, so you're very familiar with it. It can't harm.
Yeah, exactly, Danny. And you'll know your body better than anyone. I think Dave's advice there, because Machu Picchu is obviously not as high as Kili. There's still parts to it that it's going to be challenging. Even when you're in Cusco, you're like almost 3,300 meters. Even climbing the steps there, your heart rate's like 10 to the dozen.
Namche, basically, isn't it?
Yeah, it's mad because you're walking around like it's in this beautiful city and it's at 3,300 meters.
That's mad, isn't it? You see, Namche feels, even though it's quite a well-developed little town, it's quite remote, and there's high mountains everywhere, and you feel like you're in the Himalaya, and then you've got this town with a train and supermarkets and people going about their life. Same altitude. It's mad,
and you see people running up these stairs, and you try and do that. It's hard work. You almost collapse because your body hasn't acclimatized. It's easy when you come back to Cusco, mine. But Danny, you're going to love it. It's a really fantastic place.
Yep.
Andy Howie. Hey, Andy, how you doing? If you turn back on the trips, accommodation provided, or do you just return to Kathmandu, or lower down the mountain. Yeah, it depends on the severity. We've had some people that, it's not necessarily altitude based. They've, some people are just like, okay, this is enough for me. And they've walked back down with like an assistant guide, and they've stayed at Lukla or Namche ready for when people come back. We're always quite flexible because in the mountains, obviously, with regards to your accommodation, that's all covered. When you get back into Kathmandu, now those rooms wouldn't have been reserved at a loft. And as you can imagine, that hotel is a lot more expensive. So any additional nights would be chargeable. For anyone that, and we've had this happen, not dozens of times, but, enough to count on, your two hands. That generally, people can claim that kind of stuff back on insurance because it's additional costs that you weren't obviously prepared for. But generally, we can kind of try and work something out, and we want to make it be as helpful as we can to you in those challenging situations. If you have got to come down, hopefully not. Andy, with regards to being in the mountains, and hopefully, that doesn't happen. But I suppose just to be completely kind of honest with regards to those things, it's always difficult when you're in Kathmandu because those rooms have to be reserved quite far in advance. Obviously we're not the only ones using that hotel, even though we do get it's like we're taking over Hotel Aloft in Kathmandu. There are other people that now use it. So we do need to kind of know that, but we'll always find somewhere for you to be in Kathmandu. If needed. But there's awesome. Good questions coming in.
Daniel Mason, what would you guys say is the natural next step after Mera? Well, once you've submitted Mera, you've got a couple of options really. I would say probably a trekking peak of around 7,000 meters is a natural sort of progression. So you could be looking at maybe Aconcagua, obviously just shy of 7,000. There's peaks in Nepal like Burunse, which you could go to. It depends if you wanted to do something more technical. You could look at Ama Dablam. Other 6,000 meter peaks as well, because although Mera is more of there's not much technical requirements for Mera, so you could go and do Island Peak maybe, which although is not as high, does require some ladder crossings and things like that. So there's quite a lot of options to you, to be honest.
And always as well, I know it's kind of addictive, isn't it, to kind of go to these places and think what's higher, but actually, there's a lot of other areas that you can go to that's just as much an adventure.
Elbrus is another one.
But just thinking about the ones that we do, we've got the trips, like we've released our new one in Uganda, which is you're going over 5,000 meters, trekking the Ruwenzori Mountains, which is a difficult trip. But it's been popular since we released it, and again, think about what else is next, because I think if you're always aiming higher, you're going to get to a point, and obviously you're going to run out. But there are other trips, like Dave said, Aconcagua, some of the other peaks, or look at some of the other ventures. There's loads, if you want to do the Tour de Mont Blanc, if you want to go to the Huayhuash circuit in Peru, you might have heard Touching the Void, that awesome story of survival on Sierra Grande. You could go there. That's just as much an adventure, obviously not as high, but it's still, there are other trips that, instead of just going higher, it's still just as challenging. You've also got the Manaslu circuit. You've got Kanchenjunga circuit. You've also got K2 base camp. all of these are more of the trekking side of it, but they are just as challenging.
Summits of Fire.
Summits of Fire. You've got some, a lot of other adventures that you could go. Don't necessarily need to go higher, but just as challenging. That makes sense. But good question though. Very good question. Dave Rimington, bugs, spiders, and monsters. I hope Yetis aren't included in that. But anything nasty on the route to Kili? So in the first camp. So generally, when you're staying in Moshi, there's not too much there that can kind of, other than the usual bugs that you kind of find, cockroaches, mozzies. You do get mozzies.
For the malaria.
So you got to take anti-malarials in Tanzania. When you're on the mountain, you'll see some bugs, and especially in Big Tree Camp, which is your first night on the volcano. And that essentially is probably going to be the last of the bugs you'll see on the ground. Obviously, you never know. If they want to climb higher, maybe they want to get to the summit. You never know. But generally, you're going to get some in there. Like we had the quite big ants, and someone got bit on the leg. And they took a bit of a bugger, so you had to try and twist him and get him out. Can happen because you're in the jungle environment. And that's the thing with Kili. There's 5 different areas to it. You start off in the jungle, then you get to kind of the plateau, which is a little bit desert. Then you kind of get into the rocky areas. Then it's the volcanic ash. Then on the top is glaciated. There's all these different areas. But yeah, certainly when it comes to bugs, spiders, I think the only other monsters you want to kind of avoid are the ones camping with you. Maybe there's quite a lot of snorers out there, so you want to bring some kind of earplugs.
Or a cattle prod.
Or a cattle prod. Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Awesome. Hope that answers your question, mate.
David Dar, I want to use a trekking holiday to drive me to get fit. Which do you suggest would be a good choice? To be honest, Dave, it's one of them where I would rather focus on more what would sort of light your fire personally, and then aim for that one. If you want to do like a shorter trip, you could do Toubkal, but the 4-day Toubkal is a really quite a tough trek. There are longer trips that you can do that actually would be more achievable. I think that whatever training you do for any of our trips is going to be beneficial. I think we've done quite a lot of Tuesday tunings about training and things like that, and there is some information on it on the Knowledge Center. I personally would just have a look whether you want to climb a mountain, in which case I would consider like Toubkal, Kilimanjaro, whether you want to go to Machu Picchu, whether you want to go to the Himalayas and see Everest. Think along those lines about which trip excites you the most, choose that one, and then train for that one. Because whatever training you do for any of our trips is going to be transferable.
Exactly.
And you got 100% you can do it, my friend, as well. I know for a fact, because before I ever went to Everest Base Camp, which was my first trip, I got to nearly 20 stone in weight, and I hadn't ran anywhere for years. I hadn't done anything. So I started out by walking half an hour a day, 15 minutes from my house, turn around, walk 15 minutes back. Very soon it was an hour. Then I decided to see how much of that I could run. Then I mixed it up with bikes, and then I got to the mountains and I did hikes. And then before you know it, I could do EBC and it was no sweat. So don't think it's beyond you, mate.
Fantastic. No, and there's 100%. There's so many different ones out there. I think it's Louise actually going to Machu Picchu very soon. No, really good point. And you mentioned there about you've got some fears around or kind of concerns around the altitude. Anytime. I mean, I suppose it's just get it right in terms of your mind that altitude is there. Don't see it as a kind of, because it's hard. You can approach it many different ways, but just see it as another challenge that you have to face. You're going to be fine. The itinerary we've got there, it's not aggressive in terms of the terrain. It's good for acclimatizing. Acclimatizing sometimes will be challenging. You might get headaches, you might not feel well. Try and kind of keep going and try and do as much as you can and try and enjoy it. That book you've mentioned there, there could be many different breathing exercises and things like that. Any more oxygen you do get in is useful, but don't feel that you have to get that book to succeed. As long as you hydrate properly, as long as you go slow, listen to your guide, enjoy it. You're there, you've chosen to be there, have a good time. It's an amazing place. It really is. Machu Picchu is such a unique place to trek to try and enjoy it. And don't feel you have to get that book. If you do get it, let us know, because we're always
no, I haven't read it
because I haven't seen that one, and I see if it's useful. But
I'd love to find out. I mean, whatever kind of gives you peace of mind as well. And that's not to say that it's not actually useful, but whatever you can do to give yourself peace of mind so you can go ahead and trek easy. That's great. And I'm getting signals that we need to
because of
the battery.
No, we'll come to the hour anyway. I hope it's been useful today. We talked about dangers and things like that, and I hope the message got across that look, when you go into these places, it is adventure travel, it is dangerous, but we can manage it. We can do something about those dangers. Get your family on side, do your research, try and be educated about where you're going. Listen to your guide, just kind of be honest with yourself, and also that there will be bumps in the road, but they're okay. It's part of adventure. And get those questions answered. Like, hopefully some of the answers we've given you today have made you a little bit more comfortable where you're going, or about things that you may be thinking of doing. But as always, reach out to me and the team. We're here to help you get on this journey, whatever that goes, whatever you want to go. And maybe you've been out there and it hasn't quite worked well. Well, let's chat about that and see what we can do for next time. Maybe you've got to the summit now and you're looking at what's next, like Daniel was there thinking about what's next. But yeah, we'll be back next week.
Yeah, awesome. Next Tuesday.
All the best, guys.
Take it easy, guys. Bye.
Bye.